What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Relentless Runners podcast. You are listening to episode 32. I am your co-host, Christine.
And I'm Tony.
And we are the co-founders of Relentless Runners. We are an online run coaching team that provides one-on-one run coaching with a team of over 10 coaches, a registered dietitian, a strength and conditioning coach, and a clinical psychologist to teach our athletes all about mindset. And we started this podcast to bring you our running knowledge so you can follow along, learn, and grow as a runner.
And today we're so excited to have guests on our podcast. We have Kristy Bauman. We have Kelly. Kelly, how do you pronounce your last name? I should have asked you that beforehand.
Oh, no worries. It is Kelly Olzenak.
Olzenak. So Kelly Olzenak. So those two are both registered dietitians. I'm going to brag about them here in a second. But they're going to be talking to us today about nutrition for runners, but specifically, we're going to be talking about all things iron and ferritin. We were just saying, like, before we started recording today, it's a common issue that a lot of endurance athletes have, whether that's high or low iron. We talked about it a little bit on our monthly team call, actually, when the two of them were on just like going through some Q&As. So we're excited to give you guys some more information on this topic and everything you need to know about it. And without further ado, I'm going to, again, like brag a little bit about the two of them. So Kristy, she started her business, Marathon Nutritionist, and has been helping our athletes and athletes all over the world learn how to fuel their running and day-to-day life. So she's a registered dietitian, licensed dietitian. She has her bachelor's degree in food and nutrition dietetics. She has her bachelor's degree in exercise science. And her fastest marathon time is a sub 3-hour marathon that she ran in 2022 at CIM. And then Kelly, who is the newest addition to Team Marathon Nutritionist and our team too. So we have officially adopted you. But she's from Minneapolis, Minnesota. She's a 5-time marathon runner, 8-time half marathon runner. She's a fiance and a dog owner, and she's passionate also, of course, about helping runners maximize their running potential by utilizing nutrition to fuel their success and enjoy their training. In regards to all of her credentials as well, also a registered dietitian, also a licensed dietitian, and has a bachelor's degree in nutrition and dietetics. She has her master's degree in public health nutrition. And guys, I'm going to stop talking, but we're so excited to have you guys on today.
Thank you so much. We're excited to be here.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Oh my gosh, of course. This is going to be so great and again so valuable for everyone. But Christine, how about you take us through? We have like questions for you guys to dive into, because I know for myself as a coach, like this is not our area of expertise. This is all for you guys. So we have burning questions like we're excited to have you dive into. So Christine, how about you kick us off with like just what we're going to talk about today again, and our first question.
Yeah, for sure. So we are going to be really honing in today on ferritin and iron for runners specifically, just kind of in general, and how runners tend to struggle with it, and then how they can work on it, and just some things to know. So we do have a list of questions, but at the same time, we really just going to kind of keep this like an open conversation that we will probably throw in some extra follow-up questions like as we go along, just based on where the conversation takes us. So I myself, and I know Tony has as well, and most of the runners that I know tend to deal with some sort of low iron issue. And it's a constant conversation. Literally just had this conversation with one of my athletes yesterday. And so I'm really excited to really, and I know we've kind of talked about it on some of our team calls that we offer our athletes on our team, but to be able to really peel back the layers of the onion today, I'm very excited about, because I'm hoping I will learn something. I know I will. And then to be able to spread this knowledge to everyone else and then our athletes, I think this is going to be a really valuable conversation. So first question, I want to just start the whole conversation by distinguishing the difference between ferritin and iron for runners. So why don't we just kick things off by just throwing out some definitions there?
Yeah, so iron is a mineral. It's a mineral that is needed for producing hemoglobin. And hemoglobin is found in the red blood cells. It's a protein that carries oxygen to the rest of the body. So it's carrying oxygen to your muscles when you're running. Ferritin, on the other hand, is the stored form of iron. So it is stored in the body and it's released as needed. And so this can be a good measure of how much iron your body is storing in preparation for the future.
Okay. So how, like, in terms of performance, like, would you say, back to like what you said about how iron helps carry, you said it helps carry oxygen to your muscles. So would you say
Yes.
that's like the one thing on how having like your proper iron, having the proper iron and ferritin levels, is that going to be like the benefit from a performance like perspective, or is there anything else that it helps in terms of like performance for endurance athletes?
So it's important for energy production and overall cellular function as well. We're going to be talking about some of the side effects that you may experience if you have low iron or low ferritin, and it's going to kind of relate to that oxygen availability for your muscles as we talk about fatigue. But yeah, iron has other roles as well.
Okay, cool. We don't want to give it away too soon. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Christine.
So when we're talking about those levels, this is kind of a two-part question. What are the levels that are recommended for the average person compared to the endurance athlete? Because I know that I've gone to the doctor, I've gotten my blood panel done, and my doctor's been like, oh, it's 14, you're in normal ranges. And I'm like, well, no, I'm not. Like, I know I'm not as an endurance athlete. So this was one of the conversations I was having with one of my athletes yesterday. It was where it's from like 10 to, I'm not sure the max, and I'll let you throw the numbers out there, but the doctor was like, no, you're fine. And it's like, well, not as a marathon runner, it wasn't high enough. So what would you say are the recommended levels for runners, those who are doing marathons and really kind of exerting themselves?
Kelly, do you want to take this one?
Sure, I can start and then feel free to dive in. So I think kind of some things to consider as you're talking about iron levels. When you get an iron panel done, there are a lot of different lab values you can be looking at beyond just your total iron. As marathon runners, a really key value we want to consider is your ferritin. And so, Christine, the levels you were probably referencing when you said, I think 10, that probably is being referenced in regard to ferritin. Because
yes, I was.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Oh, no worries, no worries. A normal ferritin level would be kind of between like 12 to 200 for women and 25 to 300 for men. However, for endurance athletes, you really want to see a minimum of 35, 40 plus. Even better if it can get higher, but some people it's just natural. Ferritin levels will never be able to get that high. So that's, I think, one lab value you definitely want to be considering. And then also thinking about your iron levels, just your total iron. For men, that would be between 50 and 150, and for women, between 35 and 145. Again, a little bit higher for women training, or men and women training for marathons, but also training at altitude as well. You might additionally want to have it bumped a little bit higher. So keeping that in mind. But I'm going to stop there, see what questions there are, and Kristy, if I missed any key values there.
I have a question. I was going to say, I have a question. How does altitude affect your iron or like ferritin levels? Is it because of the lack of oxygen? Like when you're up there?
Yeah, so just lack of oxygen when you're running, you can get a lot of different, specific to running and endurance sports, a lot of different challenges because of the kind of thinner oxygen, less oxygen. It's more, I think you fatigue faster. So I think just adding to generally like needing to support that higher level of strenuous activity, just really wanting to make sure the iron is at a suitable level for that.
Okay. Did you have questions?
That's interesting.
Christine?
Yeah.
I had another follow-up question.
I did. I actually did.
Okay, you go first.
Okay. Just as we were talking about the levels and things, I actually kind of have two questions, but we can like go back and forth, Tony, if we need. So my first question is, can you have a high iron count but low ferritin?
That was my question.
Are you going to add that too? Yes.
Yes.
Round part.
That's me.
Okay. All right. So I guess it can be possible. What does that mean if, I guess maybe that's the next question.
So yes, you definitely can. I think Kelly kind of alluded to this. You have to look at the big picture. So you have to look at the iron, have to look at the ferritin, you have to look at the percent saturation, the total iron binding capacity. And so they're all intertwined, and that's where you have to really dive into of like what's affecting what. And that's where a doctor and a sports dietitian can help look at those numbers in more detail specifically.
Yeah, that kind of leads to like another question too, because something that I haven't experienced this, but it's because like in the past when I've gotten my blood work done, I've gone through something like Inside Tracker, or like I now have like she's like a sports like PCP, so she like understands a little bit more of like athletes' needs, and it's not like pulling teeth to tell her like, hey, I want to get this checked, because she's an endurance athlete herself. But for athletes of mine that like want to just get a pulse on like where they're at specifically in this area, it is like so hard for them sometimes, like, and they've been turned away. Like the doctor said, no, you don't need to get that checked. Is there a reason? Like, do you guys understand why? Like, is there like one level that maybe the doctor sees that they're like, oh, we don't think we need to like look into this further? Or do you know anything about that being like an issue on like why that's the case? Because it's always like so frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say a little thing and then I'll let Kelly jump in. So you have to remember you're probably the healthiest person that they're seeing that day when you come into your doctor's office. And so, yeah, it's one of those things like in the medical field, you have to advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
Because
that's super interesting point. Yeah.
You know, they have really short time, you know, it's how our medical system is set up. They have really short time slots. They're trying to get through clients, probably trying to play catch up because they're already behind.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I don't know, that's one piece of the puzzle, I would imagine.
It's funny, Tony, that was my other question.
Oh my God.
Was why do you have to ask specifically to get ferritin drawn or like measured instead of just iron? Why do you have to like ask the doctor to also get ferritin? So that's funny. We were right on. We're right on cue there with our questions. That is interesting, but that is a good point of like, you're probably the healthiest person that they've seen that day, considering if you look at everybody who's probably going in there. That is kind of interesting.
Yeah. And a good reminder too, to be an advocate for yourself too. If there's like a little pushback, like from the doctor, like you being the person, like not being afraid to like push back, to just like ask for more. So yeah, thanks for we're classic on the same wavelength, Christine. But always. I know. So another thing that we were curious about that we'd love to hear your perspective on. So let's say if you could educate us a little bit on like supplementation for iron levels, because I know that when it comes to like the type of product, like let's say somebody has like low iron and they need to like raise it. Is there benefits to one type of iron supplement compared to another? How do you supplement during like, are there things we need to keep in mind like during the day, which I know we've spoken about a little bit more before. So could you just break that down about like, how does one supplement if they want to like increase their iron, and like what are things they need to be mindful of?
Yeah, something I would definitely start with in regards to supplementation is not supplementing before getting your lab values done. We would never recommend blindly taking an iron supplement without establishing a baseline of getting your testing done. Mm-hmm. And with getting your testing done, something really pivotal that also is at play here is you can't get testing done within 2 days of a really hard workout. It's not recommended to get it done within 2 weeks of being sick or within 2 weeks of a race. These instances can inaccurately elevate your iron levels and make it maybe look like you have a normal iron levels when you might not actually. So if you're considering supplementation, getting tested, keeping those factors in mind so you can kind of plan strategically about when you're going to get that done. As you mentioned, Tony, like Inside Tracker, if you're just somebody who's curious if you could have low iron, sometimes it might be more accessible to go to a lab versus a PCP, just to get that initial level. So starting there, getting those metrics and thresholds for yourself. And then depending on if you do have low iron, talking more about supplementation gets even trickier because it really is dependent person by person on what works best. You know, as you noted, there are a ton of different supplements, whether it be in pill form, in liquid form. It can really be trial and error to determine the best kind of like track for you to work on to get that iron up. And some of it could even just be through diet, like, you know, not even jumping straight to supplementation. I'm going to pause there, Kristy, see what you want to add, but those are some initial thoughts I have.
No, I think that's
so
really good.
interesting.
I mean, I know personally I've experienced low iron and continue to navigate this. And, I've used different types of irons. There's different forms of iron as well. And I've used different types, and I don't know, you know, depending on your levels, a doctor might recommend one, and then, find out that doesn't work as well. And so I know Kelly has experience with going through trying different types of supplements as well.
Yeah, I've tried liquid form before,
Me too.
but
Yeah.
and then I'm doing just like the typical like kind of pill form right now. Because I've been kind of trying to raise it up, and I've been like in contact with my doctor, so I'm not like blindly doing it, but I don't remember either one working better than the other, honestly.
I will say
I remember the liquid being like, oh, that'll absorb better, but I don't remember it actually doing that.
mine, yeah. Well, even like back to when you're Kelly, when you were talking about being strategic about when you even get your blood work done I thought was interesting, because the one time that my blood work came back, not the most recent time when I found out my ferritin is still, well, it dropped down a little bit because I've been lazy with supplementing. So that's on me. I did raise it, and then it just went down a little bit. But before that, when I got blood work done, it was like days after I did a 10-mile race leading up to like while I was in marathon training. So I was like racing that race, and I got my blood work done like 3 days later or something like that, or a couple days later after I got home. And my iron level was like high. My ferritin was still low, but my iron was like definitely, it came back like high that day. So now I'm curious if that's why it could have been like a little bit more skewed. But that was like interesting that you said that can affect things.
It's definitely possible. I've unfortunately have got testing done at the wrong time as well, then got it redone to kind of get
Yeah.
more of an accurate baseline. And in regard to kind of the liquid and pill form, I think it is generally accepted that liquid tends to be absorbed better, but I do think it just is so unique to each person where, in my own experience, I tried two different liquid supplements, wasn't seeing much change, then switched to pill form, a pill form that I had not tried yet, and had much more success raising it. And then another kind of just factor at play here with supplementation is determining the best time for you to take it during the day, when you're going to get the least amount of food interactions, but also noting iron can be hard on your stomach. And so sometimes it's not an option to take without food. And so it's really like a big, a lot of things intertwined when you're determining how to best supplement. And it is kind of trial and error. And so sometimes it is nice to get tested every few months at a lab if that's possible for you, because you can kind of be more reactive to what you're seeing and if the supplementation is like kind of the right mix for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we actually unpack that a little bit with talking about the time of day that it's recommended to take iron? There's so much information out there, just, and whether it's good or bad, it's a lot of like, don't eat it with caffeine, don't eat it with dairy, don't have it on an empty stomach. It's like, it's overwhelming. And do you think that maybe we could talk about that a little bit? What you guys recommend about basically giving yourself the best chance for your body to actually absorb what you are supplementing with?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing is just taking it consistently. Like that's the first step in trying to increase the levels. So, I mean, I've always, chose that time of day or tying it to something that you're already doing to remember to take it. So I'll tend to take it right before bedtime. Just because that seems the easiest time that I remember. Typically, I'm not eating, or, so they say like trying to take it 1 hour before a meal or 2 hours after a meal to increase that ability to absorb it. So that tends to be right before bedtime for myself because, like you said, caffeine. I guess one thing to be aware of, I know sometimes people are taking magnesium at night. So that would be one thing that
Yeah.
you don't want to take it with.
That's what I told you guys on the team call. I was like, so that's why it didn't work. I found that out where I take magnesium at night, and I did like take an iron before bed because I'm like, oh, it's easy, like you said, right before bed. But I did the both of them, and then my ferritin went up 1 point, which Christine was like, technically it went up, which is like great, but it wasn't. After all the consistency with doing it, I'm like, dang it, what am I doing wrong? But it's like crazy how much how it can affect it.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's hard because when Tony last year, before I was going into a, like my first half marathon cycle in a while, we talked about this and you were kind of telling me like, okay, we're going to take our magnesium at night, which actually really helps me sleep better. I have such a better night's sleep when I take magnesium.
Same.
So that's definitely going to stay. And I'm actually consistent with it because I just keep it at my nightstand. So then we're like, okay, back up. So then we need to, in terms of like with food and all that stuff, like it was basically in caffeine and all the stuff that you're supposed to line it up with or not line it up with. I kind of got like, I like how you said, Kristy, like something that's going to remind you because you're doing it every day. So for me, example is when I go to school to pick up the kids, it's at like 2:45. So it's a couple hours after I've eaten lunch, but I'm on an empty stomach. So I would always grab my iron as I was walking out the door to go pick up the kids from school. But I did have to eat it with like a fig bar because it would give me heartburn if I didn't do that. That was the only thing. So I would eat it with like one of those, those fig bar things. But that really worked. And now that summer is here and school is out, I don't have that thing during the day to like cue me. So I have like, Tony knows, I have like a million alarms on my phone during the day to be like,
I've started doing the alarms.
Do this, do that,
and
do
I've
that.
told
Oh my
athletes
God.
to do alarms. Yeah.
Bobby's like always annoyed. It's like, go get ready for bed or do engagement on social media or take your iron, take your vitamins. And it's like, it's ridiculous. But that was what was always cueing me to do it, was that one thing during my day that was consistent. So that helped. But anyways, it was hard where it was like I finally had to figure out with the timing of taking my other vitamins and my coffee and all this stuff. It's confusing. It's hard to like figure that out. So what works well for you based on what your life looks like? Because if I'm home all day, it's easy for me. Whereas like, what if you're a nurse and you're on the go and your nutrition intake is different. It's not like kind of like your standard breakfast, lunch, dinner because you're on the move and on your feet and working. So I'm sure it's hard for a lot of people based on their lifestyle to figure out the opportune time to actually take it where it's going to work the best way.
Yeah. I always think about too is like, okay, if I'm taking it with a meal, can I, have it with a vitamin C? Like maybe you time it with your snack. And you have kiwi or you have an orange or other citrus fruit at that snack, maybe you end up eating string cheese with that snack as well. Well, at least you have the vitamin C food that helps increase absorption and hope that it absorbs it.
Yeah.
That's what I need to change is the vitamin C. Maybe I'll grab clementines instead of a fig bar or something.
Some supplements have vitamin C in it now too. So I know. I think the one that I take has it in there and like some other stuff. But the complicated world of trying to supplement with your iron. Okay, let's get into the nitty gritties of the signs and symptoms that we're all waiting for. I know that because we do want to talk about both. Just because I know, I had an athlete actually. She thought because of her energy levels, during training. We looked into this and I'll let you talk about it, but it was shocking that it was oh, it's high iron. So can you guys speak to both the signs and symptoms? We'll first talk about low iron maybe of what are some signs and symptoms of that. And then we'll dive into that. And then we can talk about high iron.
Yeah, absolutely. So thinking about low iron, kind of some telltale signs and symptoms, especially if you're just starting your training block or mid training block, that you should definitely keep an eye out for would be kind of fatigue beyond what's explainable. So for example, when I first found out I had low iron, it was mid training block and I expected to be tired because my mileage and volume was increasing, but I was a type of tired beyond what I could explain or expect from that. And something that really made me go get tested was doing a hard threshold workout and just feeling so challenged at meeting paces that I theoretically hit most days. So fatigue, that weakness during running, pale skin, also shortness of breath, dizziness. Like another thing in my personal experience when I first had low iron was doing hill repeats, and I remember one day just doing them and feeling so dizzy. And so that was definitely a symptom for me. Cold hands and feet, brittle nails, even unusual cravings can be signs and symptoms of iron, or of low iron. So I think those are kind of the major for low. I can pass it to you, Kristy, to talk more about high iron symptoms.
Yeah, do you want to stick with low and keep talking about low?
I was just gonna say, like, oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, good call.
I was going to say, like, I remember I had the same experience as you, Kelly, where when I was in my marathon build, before I found out everything was really low, was like the workouts, like, and threshold workouts and stuff too. And it was like stuff I was able to hit earlier on in training, and I was fine and I felt super strong. And I like how you phrased it, where it's like you just felt like weak during those workouts. Like I didn't have the power that I used to, like, weeks ago. I guess it would be like more months ago at that time, but yeah, it was like everything was really hard. And it wasn't a matter of like, I don't know if this was your experience, Kelly, but like for me, it wasn't a matter of like totally bombing the workout completely, but it was like so labored to like, and to even like either hit paces, or honestly, it was like I was just missing them by like a little bit, but it took so much effort to even like get to that. Like it was almost really subtle and tricky. And that was what was so hard with the marathon training, is like, it's so easy to be like, oh, well, I'm marathon training. Like I'm just tired, I'm in the thick of it right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know when it happened to me, it was like I remember thinking this is beyond what I could explain from just like a poor night's sleep. Like this wasn't just sleeping bad. This is something else. And I think that's why when you're thinking about, planning races and looking at kind of your calendar, getting a handle on understanding your iron and what other like nutrient needs you might have, it's kind of like for me now a precursor to my training block. Making sure I have everything lined up and not saving it to like, oh, I'm just going to figure this out once my training block starts. Like prioritize thinking of it in advance so you can really get set up, kind of like base building.
I was just thinking, yeah, I love that. I love this. Keep talking. This is so good.
Yeah, I know for me, for low iron symptoms, I always notice it on the easy runs, that the easy pace is just harder. So I'll like have almost asthmatic shortness of breath. And I'm like, why is my breathing so heavy? Or like running up a hill easy and it's hard. Mm-hmm. I don't know. The other symptom, which I think is related to iron, is like when you're sitting down and standing up quick, that dizziness. Okay. I want to say that might be related to iron as well.
Feeling.
The lightheaded. Yep.
That makes me want to have my husband get his checked again, because he has celiacs. So like when he first found out he had celiac disease, like they did his blood panel and the iron, I think it was the iron was like ridiculously low at that point, and he had to get an infusion. But he kind of like jokes about it. And like, I always say, I'm like, I don't think this is normal, but he did get like a blood panel done like relatively recently. I think he gets it done like every year or something, but he's like, oh no, they said that my iron is like good. But it's a lot of issues where when he stands up, he gets like lightheaded or like dizzy, and he like stands there for a second and then he's like good. So yeah, that makes me want to know his numbers, to like use those references that you talked about beforehand and be like, like maybe not. That's so interesting.
Yeah. I find one of the things that's hard about, Kelly, what you were saying, fatigue is one of like probably the biggest symptoms that you tend to hear people talk about when it comes to low iron is you're fatigued. But and Kelly, I'm not sure if you're a mom or not, but Kristy, I know you are. And as a mom, sometimes it's like, well, is that fatigue from just my day to day as a mom, or is that like fatigue from low iron? And so when my doctor, when we were talking about it, I was just there like maybe a month or two ago, and he asked me, he's like, well, are you tired? And I'm like, well, I'm a mom of 3 and like they're little kids. So like, yeah, but I don't know if that's from that or if it's from low iron. So Kristy or Kelly, do you have like, I know Kelly, you were kind of explaining what the fatigue felt like for you. It was more than just like a bad night's sleep, but any other like advice for maybe moms maybe or dads to kind of like distinguish the two of them apart, if there is any insight there? I don't know.
I think that's just where you have to get tested just to see, to rule it out. Because a year ago, I was taking naps basically every single afternoon during marathon training. and, you know, thinking it was the iron piece of it. But now I'm on this venture of, you know, maybe there's more contributing to it as well, or like my body wasn't able to actually absorb the iron in my body.
I see. Okay. All
I
right.
also think just for women, I'm not going to say everyone has low iron because I don't think that's the case at all. But for women in particular, because of your menstrual cycle, the chance that you could have low iron if you're in high intensity training blocks, you're running a lot of, you know, high volume or even just higher volume than what you'd be doing if you weren't marathon training, the chance you could have low iron, it's worth checking out. It's, you know, just like you can lose iron through your sweat, through your menstrual cycle, from your foot strike running. There are just so many ways you could be losing iron, where it's just worth checking out. And like Kristy said, it, you know, luckily isn't too big of a commitment. It's a pretty quick blood draw. And if you use something like Inside Tracker or LabCorp, or I think I've used Quest Diagnostics as well, they make it relatively easy. Where I think if you pay out of pocket, I think it's usually around $50 and you get a really extensive panel. They also do a good job kind of visually displaying the metrics and the ranges. So, you know, you don't, like, fortunately don't have to reference back to the podcast. You can, you know, hopefully see it and get a pretty good idea once you get your results in, where you're at and if you should seek further help.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And
that's
again,
good.
I really liked
do
your
have
idea of like, oh, go ahead. I was just going to say, I like the idea of like going into a training cycle, and like how you would treat or do base building, like use that as your time to like get everything set in a good like place, like as you enter marathon or half marathon training. So thanks for that advice too. So that's good to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I just had a side question based on something that Tony had said about Will, her husband. You had said that he got an iron infusion, and I was curious if that is worth getting or not worth getting, if like as a runner maybe going into a training cycle, and if it is low and they're just trying to like get it up high before going into a training cycle, so maybe that on top of supplementing and certain food choices. But what are your thoughts on iron infusions?
I think that's a conversation with your doctor, because I don't know, you know, what they're probably going to have a viewpoint on it, or the accessibility of it. Because I mean, that's the fastest way to increase it, but it's not necessarily needed unless it's an emergency,
really low.
I would imagine.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know if this is the case in every health system, but generally if you're seeing like a PCP, it would have to be like all your iron levels would need to be very depleted to warrant an infusion. For example, like I had normal iron, but really low ferritin, and an infusion just like wouldn't have been warranted. They would have had a hard time sending it to the hematologist, and the hematologist would have been like, why are you doing this? The total iron is fine. So I think, yes, like Kristy said, it's the fastest way to get it done, but probably unlikely unless you're like really, really depleted.
Yeah, I think he was anemic at the time because he couldn't get out of bed. Like he was sleeping until, and this is baseball season too. So I think they were looking for a quick turnaround to be able to like play and have energy, but he would sleep until like 1, like, and he would wake up after sleeping for like 10 hours plus and feel like he got hit by a bus still. So it was like, I think his levels were like crazy low. And I think they said he was anemic. But yeah, that's like super helpful to have that, information too on like what's kind of like worth it or when it's necessary, I guess.
Or if you did get your lab values back, say from like Inside Tracker, you could try going directly to like a specialist, whether it be a sports dietitian or sports doctor or hematologist, going like bypassing your PCP in that scenario. But yeah, for Crohn's, if you have Crohn's or celiac, those are two diseases where low iron is very common, and infusions are typically like a regular treatment.
One of my athletes has Crohn's, and she gets them
same.
like throughout the year. Yep.
She gets infusions. Okay, cool. Thank you for asking that. I know that was kind of like,
I said, let's talk high iron.
High. That's what I was going to say. Let's transition to some of the signs and symptoms of high iron, and then just kind of some thoughts and insight around that.
Yeah, so the tricky part with high iron is it can present the same or similar symptoms as low iron. And so it can again be fatigue, weakness, abdominal pain, joint pain. So, yeah, that's the tricky part. Again, that's why testing doesn't lie. Testing will tell you what your iron levels are.
So, and also, just real quick, why it's really important to get your baseline tested before you just supplement, so that you don't just accidentally go crazy on the iron and overdo it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Shoot it off the chart. Yeah.
And to be testing while you're supplementing, or if you're taking a higher dose, like you might think like, oh, I'm taking iron. Why am I experiencing these symptoms? Well, it could go off the charts, like you said, the other way.
Yeah. So the follow-up question is, if you have high iron, how do you get it back down?
Yes. Conversation with your doctor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because there might be other medical needs, reasons, diagnoses in that are contributing to it. But yes, I've had an athlete with high iron or two.
I remember seeing Danny Jones. She runs with Joe Bosshard's team out in Boulder, and I remember her talking about she had something like she had really high iron, but there ended up being a further diagnosis. I forget, it may have started with an H or something like that, but she had something, and she had to go to I think it was a hematologist to figure it out, and she was on a prescription or something like that to help, and did other things to help get it down. But that makes sense where it's it could just be high iron from over supplementation. It could be something more than that. So seeing a doctor for medical advice, being helpful. But yeah, it's so tricky when it's all the same symptoms. I think the last question that we have for you guys is, what are some food choices to help increase iron levels? And I know you talked a little bit about, because we were gonna ask about food pairings too, and you did mention vitamin C. But again, food choices to help increase iron levels, and food to pair it with to help your body absorb it better. And also, I wanted to be mindful of those who are vegetarian, because I know that there are some certain things that those who aren't vegetarian, it's easier to have access to. But just any thoughts on that too, that again, things outside of just supplementation, since we talked a lot about that, what are other things from food choices that people can incorporate into their diet to help with these levels?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we can kind of break this into two different sources. So one being heme iron sources, which are very well absorbed, and one being non-heme sources, which are less absorbed, but still very worthwhile to consume. So examples of heme iron sources would be beef, bison, chicken, turkey, pork, and lamb would be kind of your hard hitters for iron there. However, fortunately, fish and seafood also have iron, like salmon, tuna, shrimp, oysters. So, if any of those sound good, or if someone's pescatarian, those are great ways to incorporate some heme iron sources into your meals. And then non-heme sources would be a little bit less absorbed, but still worth including in your diet. So legumes like lentils, chickpeas, beans, nuts and seeds like pumpkin seeds, cashews, almonds. Veggies would be like spinach, kale, broccoli are great iron sources. And grains could be like quinoa, fortified cereals, brown rice. And in terms of pairing, really pairing iron with a vitamin C source is a great way to enhance absorption. So whether you're just having iron with, a glass of orange juice, or a snack with a clementine or an orange, or say you make steak fajitas and have peppers, that would be a great way to add in that vitamin C component. And then lastly, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but being mindful of any things that could inhibit absorption to the extent possible. You can't change your whole life to try to eat it to make the iron be best absorbed, but in general, coffee and tea limit absorption. So you'd prefer to not be trying to have an iron that you're hoping to get a big bang for when you're having coffee or tea. Same with chocolate. Dairy in general can reduce absorption a little bit, and carbonated beverages. So thinking
Ooh,
about
didn't know
that,
that
where like
about
if you could
carbohydrated
just,
beverages.
if you could like avoid, say you wanted a sparkling water, like avoid having that with your meal and enjoy it at a different time, would be one way to just hopefully give it a good chance of being absorbed.
Yeah.
Kristy, what would you add?
Then like one other thing, thinking outside of food. So even cooking with cast iron, like a cast iron skillet, when you make acidic foods like tomato sauce or spaghetti sauce or applesauce, it helps increase absorption, actually a fair amount, using
Dang.
cast iron skillet too.
I have one and I use it a lot. Maybe that's why also maybe that's why it's kind of wonky sometimes because we have both, but I use a cast iron skillet. I love it. That's so interesting.
There's also, maybe one of you can think of the name of it, but there's this little iron fish you can get to cook in your, what do you know? Is it iron, or Kristy, do you know the name of it?
No, I don't offhand what you're talking
Let
about.
me Google it, but it's like a little fish that's just the shape of it. But you put it
Uh-huh.
in like rice when you're making rice, or you could put it if you're making taco meat, put it in there and it will give iron. I think it's maybe similar to what a cast iron is,
Oh,
but
It's
that's
called Lucky.
cool.
It's called Lucky Iron Fish. It's a fish
yes.
shaped cast iron thing, and it provides dietary supplementation of iron. Oh, so interesting. I've never heard
That
of
is
that. That's
so
cool.
cool.
I might
Oh
get one
my
of these.
God.
I was literally
Yeah,
taking notes,
seriously.
even though I like obviously I'm part of this conversation and I edit the podcast. So I'm going to go back and listen. I'm like literally taking notes of everything you're saying because I'm trying. I want to like do more food sources to increase my iron. So I probably
That's
will buy that. I'm going to
awesome.
look into it.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that nugget. That is like so awesome. Oh my God, I didn't
Yeah,
even know that those existed.
I've I've never tried it, but I really need
Hmm.
to because it seems like such an
Yeah,
easy thing you can add without having to worry about the timing. There's so much less to factor in about just using this
Yeah.
little fish as you're, making something.
totally.
So I also want to try it.
Yeah.
Amazon, here I
Christine.
come.
Yeah.
I'll send the link.
We'll include the link.
Yep. Yes.
Oh my gosh, this was like so amazing and so helpful. Christine, any other questions before we close it out for today?
I don't think so. I had been writing my questions down here in our little notes thing as we were going along, and I've asked everything that I could think of that comes up with my athletes a lot because it's definitely like a
Yeah.
big topic of conversation, or even just in my own
Yeah.
personal journey. And you guys have been super helpful. So, yeah, any other questions or follow up or any last thoughts from you guys?
Nothing offhand that I can think of. I feel like we covered so much and like we were able to dive into the specifics and then also talk about our personal experience. So I think it was so good. So good to hear from
Yeah.
you all too.
Yeah. Well, how about you guys tell us like where can everyone find you guys and learn more about like you, what you do? Christy, how about you tell us?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram, marathon.nutritionist. Send me a DM, let me know that you listened and anything that you picked up on or learned. And Kelly sees one-on-one clients as well as myself. And then there's also group coaching, master classes, and other ways that I work with athletes and runners with their nutrition as well.
These ladies are amazing. They've supported our team so much in like so many ways. We highly recommend if you guys need any more like individualized support or you want to dive in on your nutrition generally too. Like I know that you guys work a lot with like endurance athletes and stuff, but even if you're just wanting to better like your day to day like nutrition, like those two are just such a great resource. They're so educated. They'll be able to support you from like a human perspective and athlete perspective. So definitely check them out. And if you guys want to learn more about like Relentless Runners, you can, follow us at Relentless Runners on Instagram. You can go to relentlessrunners.com to learn more about our one-on-one coaching. But please let us know how you like this episode. If you have any follow-up questions, we'll have to have you guys on in the future. Maybe we'll talk about something else that comes to mind. But we appreciate you all joining us today. And don't forget to subscribe and review this episode. And we'll see you guys next time.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.